Welcome to Engage Math, Lesson 31, problem number 1. And we are solving quadratic equations today using the quadratic formula. So if you haven't learned how to sing the quadratic formula, I have to say it's a pretty good way to remember it and memorize it. So you can always look up the quadratic formula sung to the song, Pop Goes the Weasel. For your benefit, I am not going to sing it for you. All right, let's get started. And we can solve problem A. I'm going to zoom in so you can see our work really clearly. I'm just going to kind of the first time mention to you what A, B, and C are. And then as we move on, I won't go through that every time. But A is always the number in front of the x squared, which in this case is 1. B is the number in front of the x term, which is 8. And C is the number that doesn't have a variable next to it, which is called the constant. And in this case, it's C. So now we can take all those values and substitute them into our formula. And so x is equal to -8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is going to be 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 15. And all of that is over 2 times a, which in this case is just 2. All right, so now let's simplify. So we have x equals -8 plus or minus the square root of, and this is going to become 64, and it's going to be minus 60 all over 2. All right, and so now I'm going to simplify again. X equals -8 plus or minus the square root of 4, and I'll write that still as 2 steps, over 2. All right, so now we know that the square root of 4 is just 2. So here I'm going to just say x equals -8 plus or minus 2 over 2. And now we're going to simplify that. So there's really 2 solutions here. -8 plus 2 over 2. And the other solution is going to be -8 minus 2 over 2. The first solution is going to be -6 over 2 or -3. So that's one of our answers, x equals -3. The other is going to be -10 over 2, which is -5. So the two values of x that would make this original equation true are -3 and -5. Okay, let's move on to B. So for B, I think that there is a little bit more math that's going to go into this one because we might not be able to take out the value that's in the square root symbol. So what we're going to do is we're going to start again with x equals. This time we're going to just say x equals -2 because that's -b plus or minus the square root of b squared. So 2 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So 2 times 6. All right, I'm going to simplify now. So x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of, and it's going to be 4, and this time it's going to be plus because it's going to be a 70. If you think about that, it's 4 times 6 is 24. 24 times 3 makes it 72. Just so you see why it's a positive 72 that we're getting in that case. So all of that is over 12. We're going to continue. X equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 76 over 12. Now we have to go back to one of the skills you learned in an earlier lesson of Engage Math, or you learned in your algebra course or somewhere along the way. We can simplify the square root of 76. So if we think of the two numbers that multiply to 76 such that one of them is either a perfect square, like something we know the square root of, and if we're not sure, we can always break it down. So the two numbers that I'm thinking of, there's not a lot, but I'm going to think of, let's do it this way. Let's start with 38 and 2 because you know that every even number can be divided by 2. And then the 38 can be broken down to 19 and 2. So we have a pair of 2's, which means that the square root of 76, we could bring that 2 to the outside because there's a pair, and the 19 is inside. So now, the good news is we're going to really be able to simplify this because we have x equals -2 plus or minus 2 root 19 over 12. And because there is a number that can divide nicely into that -2, this 2, and this 12, we can take one more step. And what we can do is we can write our final answer as sorry, that's it's still a 12. We could write our final answer as every one of those three that I circled in green being divided by 2. So our final answer can be written as x equals -1 plus or minus the square root of 19 all over 6. Let's just move that up a little bit so you can see that's 6. Okay, and that would be our final answer for that problem. All right, let's go to C, and I'm gonna, again, you can see why we need a lot of room for the quadratic formula. All right, so for C, we're again asked to do it by the quadratic formula. Honestly, it's not the easiest way to do it with the quadratic formula, but I want you to see that the quadratic formula works all the time. An easier way would have been to move the 5 to the right by adding 5 to both sides and then dividing by 3 probably, and then taking the square root of both sides. But let's do the quadratic formula just so that you totally understand that the quadratic formula works every time. So A is equal to 3. I'm just going to write it this time because it's a little bit tricky. B is equal to 0 because there's no x term, and C is equal to -5. So x is equal to, it's just basically going to be a 0 because negative b is still 0. So it's 0 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 0 squared. You can put squared, still going to be 0, minus 4 times 3 times -5 all over 2 times 3, which is going to be 6. So I'm just going to put 6 in the denominator, and we have x equals, I don't even need to write that 0. So we basically have plus or minus the square root of, and this becomes 0, -4 times 3 times -5 is going to be, as we know, 4 times, there's a lot of ways to do this, but I'm thinking 4 times 3 is 12, times 5 is 60, so it's a positive 60. You could have also done the 3 times the -5 and then multiply that by 4, but try to do it without a calculator if possible, over 6. And just like we simplified the square root of in the last problem where we ended up with the 2 square root 19, we can simplify the square root of 60, because this time I'm going to break it down as, how about 4 and 15? That becomes 2 and 2. So the square root of 60 can be written as 2 square root 15 over 6, which simplifies to the square root of 15 over 3 as our final answer. Okay. Oh, don't forget plus or minus. I forgot to rewrite that plus or minus, so don't forget that. All right, last one, D. So this time we have to rearrange everything. I'm going to make the left side equal to 0 this time and leave the 3x squared on the right, move the 5x over, which makes it minus 5x minus 1. So x equals -b, which is going to be a 5, a positive 5, plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now notice that I'm putting the -5 in parentheses because when that gets squared, it should be a positive 25. So it's b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times 3, 2 times a, which is 6. So x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. -4 times 3 times -1 is going to be a positive 12. So we're going to have plus 12 over 6. So our final answer is going to be x equals 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 all over 6. And that's our final answer. All right, we'll see you next time at Engage Math. I'm going to just zoom in for 1 minute though, so you can see all the answers together. Thanks so much.